All right, Bigfoot Society, we got the privilege of talking to an old friend tonight, Mr. Mike Ann from Tactical Bigfoot Research. How's it going, Mike?
Good, brother. How you doing?
Dude,
Been a
I'm
little bit.
doing so good. It's a great Thursday night out in Iowa, and we are just burning down. I don't know if it's like that out in New York, but
We're raining tonight, so it's not too bad here. But I pulled up the map because we got a bunch of friends up in Michigan for the big Parafest up there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm happy I'm not in the Midwest or up the Upper Peninsula because I'm watching those storms, and I'm like, no thanks, guys. I'll keep
yeah.
with my rain.
It's a rough one out here, but thankfully Friday night the heat's gonna break. But dude, I'm so excited to have you on because like back in the clubhouse days, a group of us, we used to chat quite a bit, and I was like, man, I gotta get Mike on the podcast, and we've been trying and
Yep.
finally it worked out. We had a great chat at Monster Fest last year,
We
and that
did.
was fun. We had a supper together. That was good stuff. But I'm glad to have you on here, Mike. Let's start with this. So, how did you get into the whole Bigfoot game? How did the name Tactical Bigfoot
Oh,
Research come about? I haven't heard that story, I think.
so it's weird, actually. I work with a couple of jokers, and one of the guys always said that he was related to Bigfoot. And I was homesick and got on the internet and started Googling Bigfoot sightings in my local area because I was like, hey, I'm going to find something and we're going to just, like the meme, going to send it to your friends and stuff like that. Well, when I started doing the research, I found a sighting less than 5 miles from the house that was in a local newspaper and pretty contemporaneous to that. I mean, within a few years. In fact, there's a local paranormal group getting ready to do a whole show on it. And it was like, I can't believe this is down the street from me. So I get on the text message. I send a link to everybody to, a bunch of our friends, our small little group of fishing and hunting guys. And they're like, yep, he's got friends, he's got family. And then I started getting side pings from some of the folks that, yeah, we've got guys working for us looking in this particular area in this park, and we've got other guys looking at this. And then I got a buddy from college. It's like, well, there's a state agency that releases one Bigfoot and one mountain lion, one Bigfoot and one timber wolf together. Just, a ha-ha kind of thing. Well, that got me thinking. I'm full of useless information. When it gets locked up here, it's up here. I can see names and faces, and I won't forget a name and I won't forget a face. Sometimes I can't put them together at the same time. But useless stuff. But I had been talking to an individual in law enforcement that worked for an agency, and I was asking him, what do you know about the mountain lions? And he says, well, I really don't believe in the mountain lion thing coming through New York, and that's where I'm at. And he goes, but when I was working in the Chautauqua County area, we took a lot of crazy stuff related to Bigfoot. And you go on, look at the BFRO thing, and you can kind of see one of those sightings. Well, that started me on a deep dive. So I'm home for, like I said, some surgery. I start doing some searches. I come across Seth Breedlove's Small Town Monsters, The Beast of Whitehall, which had some law enforcement stuff in contacts. And that's my field, is I work in law enforcement, and I had a background in archaeology and anthropology when I went to college. So I started doing some more deep diving. So now I see this and I'm like, all right, I got to see what else is going on. So I start Googling the stuff in Chautauqua County, more stuff in New York. I start coming across the old Monster Fest stuff, which I probably caught here and there, like most folks. I saw the Leonard Nimoy stuff, the In Search of stuff as a kid, but it wasn't my thing. But I find this stuff down in Chautauqua County, and there's a festival down there. And I find a kid down there, Ryan Reading, and I start watching his channel. And I'm like, take my niece and nephew. I'm still out of work. I can't really do anything. Let's go down and see what's going on. Well, I end up meeting Ryan, and he introduces me to Steve Culls. And you've met Steve, the Squatch detective. And we're out shooting, the breeze out front and talking to Steve. Tell me a little bit more about this and, his background, my background. And Steve sends me a friend request later that day on Facebook. And he offers, hey, if you're up in the capital region in New York, come on, we'll go up to, Lake George and the area he's had his sightings, and happened to be a couple months later, I was up there for a conference, and I went over, got changed out of my suit that I was in for the conference, and went up to the mountains, and nothing happened. And I thought, hey, this is great. If I'm going out with this guy says he's into Bigfoot and everything, and nothing happens, that's great. Because I'm like, if I get up there and there's something goes on, I'm going to be a little iffy about things. So Steve takes me to all those famous places in Whitehall, and the Abear Road and down, and then we ended up in Vermont. We end up going over, everything's really close over there. So over to where the Vermont trail cam footage and Frank's place, and we kind of hit it off as friends. I start doing some stuff with him, and at that time, I was making tactical knives and tomahawks for military and law enforcement folks, and doing some survival gear. And he goes, "Hey, join my group." He goes out to do his talks, and I would go along, kind of watch the table, and I would bring along tactical stuff and say, hey, if you're going into the woods, there's gear that you should take with you. You should take a good knife with you. You should take, first aid kit, backpack, stuff people don't think about, and they want to go right out in the woods. And so that's kind of where Tactical Bigfoot Research kind of came from, was taking my X8 tactical knife company, combining it with the Bigfoot thing, and I started doing some Bigfoot quote unquote knives, and that's where we kind of rolled into this thing. And then it's been an ongoing thing where I go out and I work with Steve, and he introduced me to the guys from Nestra, who've been around since the old internet forums, back when it was just message boards. And then I got introduced to Eric Altman and the guys in Pennsylvania and his group, and heard my first scream down there with, I love to call Jay Fred because I can never say Bo Chachin properly, and I butcher it every time, good friend and all. But I got in with a bunch of good folks that introduced me to some stuff, and I've seen some stuff I can't explain, and that's kind of kept me on the go, to the point that Amy Boo brought me in Zoobook and their team, and got to work with Seth, and I've got to work with a lot of great folks. And then I have a research partner, actually two research partners, but my main one is a field biologist, and the other one's an entomologist when we can get out. And it's great to bounce different ideas off of them. And I've got a couple other projects that we'll talk about a little later that I'm working with some folks. So
yeah, you got some cool stuff going on, Mike. How many years ago did this all start?
I think, what are we at now? I was just trying to do a deep dive I've got a bunch of external hard drives, so I was just doing a deep dive in, and we're probably at 6 years now, 7 years now. So, I came to this later in life. Like I said, it kind of came outward, but then I started doing a lot of conferences and with some of the disciplines that I have that I teach and work with and stuff in my career field. I work with a lot of military and law enforcement guys, and guys will pull me aside when they find out that I'm into this, and like, hey, we were doing this or we were doing that, and kind of spun off. Then I started doing my own podcast. But the information, and every time I get ready to walk away from the subject, somebody else, I get a call out of the blue like, hey, you want to check this out, and I can't explain this. And documentation is a key. And if they can document it and we try to replicate it and we can't, or we can get as much data, it just keeps me going to see what the next thing is. And to help folks document is kind of what keeps me going. The best way to collect the best evidence that they can. I'm working on a thing right now, and the big point is that us citizen scientists, and sorry it's late for me tonight, so my words aren't coming out so great. I'm overthinking because you and I have talked about so many things over the years. I'm trying to remember where we're at. But the funding, the cost, if it's your family, it's your friends you're going out with to do this. We're not major corporations funding, major institutions funding this thing. So I'm always trying to figure out what the most reasonable priced and inexpensive way of keeping documentation is there. Even though I have a lot of really cool toys that I'm allowed to have and get to work with. If mom and dad want to take Junior out to learn about the woods and learn about the subject, I don't want them to spend an arm and a leg. I want to get that young individual or that family involved in science and in the outdoors. And if Sasquatch is the Bigfoot is the lead to that, and that kid finds something somewhere else in life, hey, I'm right behind that. So that's kind of where I'm at with the subject of educational stuff.
What do you feel, let's say, what do you feel a new person to Bigfooting, they want to go out in the field, do some research, what should they have in their bag when they go out?
First thing, first aid kit. Second thing, some water. Third thing, some food. Then, this is important. You know, we just had a mutual friend down in Florida, you know, post everything from getting some infection. You don't know if it's been out in the woods or whatever. And I've had friends that, a lot of friends that have Naked and Afraid and other things. And, you know, what do you get bit by in the middle, or you trip and you fall? You got to know those things. And that first aid kit, as we go along, is going to be pretty helpful. And I'll kind of show you how that goes along. But the other big thing is keeping a notebook. Be it a big one, be it a little one. Record what you got going on. And I'm dropping stuff as we go here. You know, having a flashlight. And this one happens to be, well, let's not blind anybody here, but this one that I've got is a multicolored flashlight. It does blue, it does green, it does ultraviolet, and UV is very big for me, as you'll find, the reds, the greens, and the blues, because when we look at different things in nature, you're going to see different things under different lights, and that's a big thing. Color combinations for me is important. So, you know, that first, and communications gear. I also carry a cell phone, an extra cell phone, and an extra tablet to hook up to some of my expensive thermals and night visions and drones and stuff, but also for some of the applications that I use, and as a backup communication device. And a communication device is so important to be able to communicate with friends, family, and whatever when you're out there. So those are really huge things to keep in there. And another thing is like little things like Live and Learn, this one here, which has different tracks. And I'm probably going to turn my green screen off for us tonight. And it's just you and me. We're not really doing audio, but the little flashcards, the little fold outs that have, you know, animal tracks. I have bigger ones with different snakes and birds and sounds and such that are so important to keep going. I mean, my gear bag is, I carry a sling bag, but I try to carry it as light as I can. You know, a way of marking out where you're at, you know. So again, we're going to turn that off for you tonight. And it happens.
Yeah, I thought we were the Predator for a minute.
Yeah. All right. So used to doing it from my side. I'm trying to remember how to turn around. Oh, there it is. Settings over on this side. You know, not that I don't use this every day for my show, you know, that. So, but I like carrying, and you see me hand these out, is a cloth tape measure, the Taylor's tape measure. Yes, some folks will say with a little water, it'll stress. It's not going to stretch too much. This particular one is plastic coated, and it's 120 inches. It gives you a known length. It's also cordage. That's the other reason that I carry it. So if you've got to make a splint and tie yourself up, you can do it, but you also have the ability, and being the cloth plastic fabric that it is, it doesn't make a lot of noise. So when you take a regular tape measure, and usually I have one on my bench here, but I moved it, you get that smack, you know, that comes through with it, you know, and it's there, and it closes up, and now it drags through the middle of you. You know, if you find a print or something like that, it's a nightmare. Just think about trying to do construction at home. So one of these is great. I also will carry paracord with a ring on the end, or a dog hook. And the reason being for these, twofold. Known length. So this one I know has, this black one here, has 18 foot of cord on it. But it's got a ring. So I can hook this to itself, or I can hook it to a tree. It's weighted. So I can put that known length up in the tree. If somebody says, I see something at this headlight, or, this height, I can throw something up, and I've done the same thing. I put the rings on the tape measures as well. And it just allows me there, but it also allows me to do a circle search. So folks that say I've lost my track. So for years I was a search and recovery diver. I still do underwater robot stuff, but I can put a stake down if I find a print, or I can take a flag, my little flags I make out of tape and bamboo, or our friend Emily over at their forest floor. She does some cute little orange ones. You've seen Alex use them. Yeah. I showed her these little ones, and then she's like, hey, can I make big ones? I'm like, sure. But these are a little smaller. So I love it because it's out there. And, like I said, Alex has used them all, and Tate and Eli, those guys have used them quite a bit. Our friends, she uses them all the time. I use the small flags. Too full for using the small ones like this because I can use them as a trail marker and the evidence. So if I find that print, I find that hair, I can put these markers down just like a police officer doing a forensic thing, or an archaeologist, start setting those marks. But then I can put that ring on my stake, and sometimes I'll carry a tent stake in there that'll physically fit, or be in a hole in a loop, I can run the string through and tie it to my branch or whatever. But then I will do a consecutive known circle to look for additional evidence items. And again, I'm documenting them either by video when I'm out there with my phone, or I generally carry a pretty good sized DSLR camera with me, or, a GoPro with me to record as much information that's out there. And, like I said, we're going through my pack quick. I also have paper envelopes for hair.
Oh, that's smart.
So, and big ones. And the big ones, so I have the little ones, the coin size, and then I have the big ones, and it's a good thing I turned this off. So on these are my evidence. So, and am I getting in the right spot? This is my sample, the date, the location, all that information. So when we talk to somebody like Darby Orcutt at NC State University, who's doing the DNA study, that one's going to come out better than the yellow wall. We can send something like that with the full documentation. I do have a UV hair collection program going on, kind of something I've been working with Doug Hychak a little bit. Just kind of inspired some of the information after talking to him, doing some UV light with some hair. But again, how I collect that data, big paper bags, they're in my bag, so I can collect, again, hair samples, like this one here, a bag of porcupine hair, that's in there. That we collected. And we got some other stuff. And eventually they get moved on to slides, and, we go from, so you slide them up with what animals they are. So what else is in there? Gloves, sterile tweezers, and those are, to get me started. Mask. Most everybody's pretty much carrying this. So that's what's generally going into my backpack. So I've got that stuff with me 24/7. So I might have like I said, a little UV flashlight, or the big flashlight. Usually I got a bunch of flashlights, and then who knows, 1 to 3 thermal cameras or night vision cameras with me.
Why would it be important to have gloves and sterile tweezers with you?
So we don't want to cross contaminate. If we come across something, we don't want to cross contaminate that information, that item that we found, be it scat, hair, skin, you want to make sure you've got that stuff there. If you're using casting materials, sometimes it's nice to keep that casting material off your hand, because some of that stuff will burn a little bit if you can't get it washed off right away. That's one reason I carry the extra cell phone and the other tablets. a lot of times I run light. So I'm not carrying the extra 25 pounds of hydrocal that's usually, or dentistone that's usually in the car. I use 3D scanning apps. I use bird apps to turn around and get that information so I have it, be it Polycam or Scan 3D. And not only if I find that track, am I scanning the track, I'm scanning the whole area so I can go back and take a look at things. Most folks, when they take that single photo, that's what they get. But again, that's what I'm saying. Take your tape measure and measure it out. But using a 3D scanning application, photopictometry is what it is. It will build, you need to take at least 20 photos to really give you that depth. There are some new 3D scanners that are out there and the prices are coming down that don't have to be hooked into a computer, but a lot of them have to be hooked into a computer or phone. So you're using a lot of memory units that turn around and, you know, a big processor to get that stuff down. But
you can do this 3D scanning like LiDAR stuff with the newer iPhones, right?
New iPhones, I'm an Android person. So I started using this stuff a couple years ago. Actually, I got a text message from a researcher in Massachusetts, and Carrie's like, I'm in the middle of the woods and I have no casting materials. What do I do? And I'm like, well, what do you got for a phone? And I said, get a scanning app. So she was my first guinea pig on a possible Sasquatch track. And the first one outside, pretty much my partner and I know that we're really using it. He's like I said, a research biologist, and he was using him in the field. He's actually got a big scanner that hooks into a laptop. But for the phone, I mean, it was great. And we've been pushing that nonstop, you know, if you've got them. And again, as the technology in the phone comes along, so what, you know, the iPhones have is that LiDAR sensor in them that some of the Androids don't. So you may get a little different definition than, but it's better than not having anything, and it's better than not having that single photo. You know, I've had that talk with a couple of folks that's what their specialty is doing like 3D scanning and printing and stuff. And they're like, well, you can't. Well, yeah, I don't have $15,000, you know, for a big expensive industrial scanner, or $800 or $900 to throw into one of the cheaper scanners. What I can do for either free with ads or, you know, $2 or $1 a month is I can go get a scanning app, and at least I have it on my phone. I can come back and I can use my PC and I can look at it at multiple different angles to see what I have. That's the thing, is that what we can pull and what we can do is it's just amazing on the information that's out there. And I switched to a different machine, so let's see if I can find a scan for a quick overview. Is that, you know, I know we've seen some of our other friends. I mean, see if I can download this one quick for you and give you a share here. Yeah. Screenshot 2, put that there. Nope. Of course, now it wants to take it, you know, is the same screenshot and overwrite the other one, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's pull up the other screen here. And so, and I know you're not using much of the video, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So we can pull in come back over to StreamYard and give you share my screen. So I just sent you the share.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a 3D scan using, you know, we can actually look at some of that definition. And if I go and pull the original file, which is loaded into something else, I really can go take a look at the whole rundown of it using some of the 3D apps. So, you know, if you go into basic windows, there's a 3D viewer right on your desktop that you can pull. And I'll pull that one up and share that screen.
Can you print out these 3D scans using a 3D printer as well? In a way,
if you have the right printer and you have the right file. So let me share and switch screens. So, what I just sent you. So this is the 3D viewer that's right from Microsoft. It's right in there. So, I mean, you can go and find your file, and I have to go back and look into my folder and stuff like that and pull it back out again. But where you would actually be able to go in and, take a look with all these things.
That is cool.
So this is one, this is just a sample, but again, I just updated this PC for doing the podcast. Everything else has been on my laptop.
Gotcha. So. This is a really good episode because it's been a while since I've really been able to dig into solid research related info. And I think this will be helpful for a lot of listeners. You mentioned in passing, I think you were mentioning or alluding to the Merlin bird app.
Merlin bird app.
Can you spend a few minutes talking about how it's important to have that on your phone if you're going out in the field?
Merlin is awesome. So it's from Cornell University. And so good shout out to one of those New York State, area colleges. But so we've got bird.net and we have Merlin. And we pull up Merlin's on my front page of my phone. So Merlin Sound ID, if I'm coming in here, allows you to go in and actually hit the Sound ID. Not only does it allow you to record what birds are there, but it gives you a visual, like, we talked to the guys on the OP about using Audacity, but at least I can take a look at things when they're going along. And if I let me pull up one of my lists in here. So my sound recordings, I can go back and I can look at my recordings. And if I play them through, it's not going to go through now, right? Now the app's not going to work right now. It's working, but it'll give me a list of, what birds are there and stuff, and I can go back and look at that audio. It's so good. But the other thing about Merlin is I can set it down in front of my computer, in front of the speakers, and if I got a general idea where they're at, you can go pick the geolocation and look. So there's a lot of time. There's a lot of time that I may watch other live shows and such, and may drop the Merlin app and kind of watch to see what comes up in the background, be it owls, crows, great horn, or great blue herons, or I'll get a call from another investigator. Hey, I got this recording. Well, as long as I can get it, clear enough where I don't have the dog and, it was recorded and then sent over, through the computer. Yeah, it's usually pretty good. And you can use that to try to figure out like where the recording's from. Well, not so much where the recording's from. If I've got a general idea, there's different folders from around the country that you can go through. Yeah, sure. So I can actually, pick up, where so you've got a geo spot. Man, sorry, the camera just is not staying clean tonight. But I can go up in the corner and kind of search by different areas to look for things where they're at, and search by, the time of the year, the family, like I've been from here down to Florida. So I've got like Zephyr Hills, Florida. I've got Fort Lauderdale. I've got, down to Miami and into the Glades, and I can look at that time of year. So, but again, like I said, there's been a couple of times where I'm watching a show or a documentary somebody's done, and, well, hey, let's take a look and see what's there, bird-wise. That is so smart. Oh man, that's really smart, dude. And the other thing about that is if you're going to get that app on your phone and then go out in the field,
make sure you take the time to download the huge file that goes with it, so you don't get out there and you're like, oh no, I can't really use it now.
And, we all end up with that, half a dozen extra phones over the years, that are just download them on those. I got like this extra little Palm thingy or whatever that has like my backup remote for like my dash camera and everything. So literally I don't have to use my regular phone. And then bird.net is similar. Again, it's another Cornell app. But again, I can visually watch this. But this one I physically have to go in and sample what I'm looking at. Where the other one will identify as it goes along. I'll actually say, oh, I want that section, and I can pull that recording. And then I can go back and look at those recordings as well.
Sure.
Another one I'll run is Physics Toolbox, which allows me to, have sound meters and everything else and kind of watch some of the stuff that's out there. So it's got, your sound meter, your tone, your oscilloscope, your spectrum analyzer.
Oh, wow.
Is all right there. So again, keeping yourself quiet and listening is just great, but it's good to know your animals that are out there. Because after I've got bird.net going, or I've got Merlin going, and there's another sound and I don't quite recognize it, like I said, taken from Chris and David and stuff like that on the OP, where they're saying, hey, throw it into, one of the spectrum analyzers. There's a couple of hunting apps that you can get, like iHunt Sound and Calls, that you can go and pick those different animal sounds and go compare them. And it's amazing how many times I notice that folks are using gators, bulls, bison in their sound. And a lot of times when I go out and do education purposes, I'll bring a Bluetooth speaker, I'll stick it in the middle of the audience, and hey, what's that? And they're like, oh, that's the T-Rex from, Jurassic Park, or that's Sasquatch. I know it's Sasquatch. That's what I heard on TV. And you're like, well, it could be, but here's this. And now we can go online. We'll pull their videos from, YouTube of, known, scientific shows or something like that. I'm still a big proponent on listening for gibbon sounds. As a young kid, I spent time as a volunteer at the local zoo and spent a lot of time with chimps, orangs, gibbons, and spider monkeys behind me on one side of the in particular building, and the other side of the building that just had some different reptiles and little stuff in between. You had, a lion, a tiger, and some other, bigger birds and stuff during the winter. So listening to those sounds all the time as a kid, man, if I hear something different, it's like, okay. But then I'll package those up and we'll ship them off to our friends. So
totally.
I apologize for the dogs there tonight. So
you're good. You're good. Do you use Onyx at all?
I don't.
Okay.
I probably should. A lot of folks that I go out with do. But I like using Scott's Bigfoot Mapping Project map when I'm out.
Oh, yeah.
We use that in Florida. I just used it last weekend. We were up in the Adirondacks looking for moose. Just as a fun thing, kind of a roll off from my show, because I missed out once looking for moose and got lost. And, that's another thing. Keep in your bag. Put a map. A good old-fashioned map. Put the old-fashioned map in your car. The first weekend we went looking for moose, we're like, oh, use your phone. That's not going to work. We had a GPS. That was a weekend. Garmin decided that they were going to get hijacked. So they had no satellites. So going back to a good old-fashioned map is so much. And pre-planning, it's the way to go, is keeping a good map. And knowing how to read a map is amazing.
That's a lost art today, man. This is some good advice.
It truly is. I mean, having a compass, having a map, having a first aid kit, those are the basics. And again, going back to the first aid kit, you have sterile tweezers, you have your gloves, sometimes you have a mask now. You generally have a plastic bag or something in that first aid kit. You
Mm-hmm.
have alcohol swabs. So you have your fire starter. Again, your tweezers to collect in a lot of those little tweezer containers. I think I moved everything in another bin. But the ability to find what's in your first aid kit now to help you collect data is so important. You know, you can, and there you got some white tape, and you got, guess what? You got medical tape, and you got, a lot of times I got popsicle sticks in them or a tongue depressor of some sort. It gives you an evidence flag.
Oh,
So
yeah.
having a good first aid kit, so important to have that stuff. And usually a lot of them come with a paracord now.
So, man, this is a solid episode. Let's switch gears for a little bit. Has there been a time when you've been out in the field and you've experienced something and you're like, ooh, things just got very serious, Bigfoot related, and I'm not sure how comfortable I feel right now? Or maybe I'm super into this right now, you know?
Well, I'd say there's not a time that I've been like, oh man, like I feel threatened or something like that. So my first PA Bigfoot capping adventure, gone out, and it's just a rainy weekend kind of thing. And like I said, I'm talking to Jay, and all day the day before, I'm talking to different witnesses. This is my first like real exposure Bigfoot type thing besides the little Chautauqua one we have here, which is an awesome event. If you're in Western New York, Peter runs a great event. I mean, he's had Meldrum, he's had Cliff, he's had Seth there, Steve's there all the time. And great area as well. But I'm there and everybody's talking about, hey, I went to a car to have a cigarette. I went out to get my smokes, hanging out with friends while they're and I'm like, all right, what's the deal with that? So I jokingly look at Jay and I'm like, hey, dude, you got to smoke? And he goes to hand me a cigarette. And as he does, we hear a scream come from the woods. Whoa. Now, it's a family camping event. It's great. And here we are, talking about cigarette, unfortunately. So, but we've got families up with us, and we're broken in 3 different groups, and we're up on this pipeline area, and you hear that scream, and I just kind of looked at him like, what do we got going here? And, we're kind of the responsible adults there. So Jay gets on the radio and starts calling other folks like, hey, did you guys do a scream? Did you just? And I'm like, man, it's just not a human scream. You felt it in your chest. Well, I got parents with young children. So now I'm like, all right, I'm the only one with bear spray and everything else. So we try to, let's get everybody circled up. Let's start bringing the groups in. We bring everybody in. I kind of have everybody stand shoulder to shoulder facing out. And we're trying to calm everybody down. I'm like, all right, let's everybody just do a scream, just kind of whatever. Everybody does their scream. And we get some responses back.
No.
And I'm like, oh. Well, they're not really paying attention because they're all giggling and laughing. But I'm like, I'm bouncing Jay and Joe and somebody else was with Brian. Was all right. So Jay always comes out of the woods bright. We'd gone in dark. I'm like, all right. So I line everybody up and we start kind of marching ourselves out. And I'm like, everybody just watch the ground because we went up this way. I want to see if anything is going to come across the trail. And some lady, a couple people down from me is like, hey, what do I got? So we find an impression. Well, let's start following the impression. So we're taking photos. And again, I've got guys that have been out there doing this for years. And then there's me with I don't know, I had 6-7 months experience looking for this stuff at that point. And we're like, okay. So we started with 15, 20 people. And next thing you know, there's 4 or 5 of us standing there. And we're like, where'd everybody go? And then as we walked out, we felt, so we could hear something kind of pacing us out. But again, we have no confirmation on what it was. We had a small Seek thermal camera, and we had my night vision at the time that the Bausch I had, which is great, or Bushnell that I have. It's great for open fields, but closed in, you get too much IR bounce back. No, actually, I didn't have it. I had this old Russian unit that I have. That
all right, cool.
Oh yeah. This is Gen 1. That
wow.
I gotta make sure the covers are on it still. This is you don't point at any light source because
just take your eyes out.
Oh yeah, takes your eyes out. It's
Whoa.
green. It's that, you know.
Oh man.
And yeah, my buddy gave it to me when he got his, you know, really expensive PVS 14. You know, but it's clear. But you know, use an IR illuminator or something like that. It just so that stays on the treasure shelf.
Right.
But so that one was like, okay, I heard but I can't tell you one way or another. Like I said, we got an impression that looked like a print, you know, and come back about 2 years later, we're up in the Adirondacks. We're sitting over top of a car where Steve had his sighting, where we filmed part of On the Trail of the Journey. And I'm leaning over the top of the car, and I've got a, you know, no-name action camera mounted on my chest. I got the recorder going. I got a thermal camera in a pocket and giving somebody else the night vision. We're waiting for Steve to set up a camera, and I'm leaning over the top of the Chevy Equinox, one of the older style, the bigger ones, and something comes across the hood and hits me in the forehead. And I'm like, oh, well, it didn't come from above. And I'm looking for acorns. I mean, we've been up there. We've hit this spot I don't know how many times. And I'm like, what? You know, another one comes across. I get hit again. I'm like, all right, that's 2. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And, you know, when I look down and look at the action camera, and the battery's dead. I mean, those things last, you know, 15 minutes if you're lucky. I now see that some of the bigger corporations come with these giant batteries you can plug in the side, and I even run other cell phone batteries into them now, and given up on them slightly, and just gone with an expensive DSLR that'll do like a hybrid camera like the Lumix, like Larson carries. But then Steve's like, they're throwing rocks, and also it was like a handful of rocks just peppered the side of the car. And we're like, okay. Now I'm running around the car, the thermal cameras, you know, turning the thermal camera on. But by the time we've scanned the area, there's nothing there. But you're like, I can't. We don't hear anybody running off. We don't, you know, that's just one of those things. You're like, okay, well, it goes in the book. You know we have known sightings in the area. Do we say it's X, Y, or Z? No, but again, we're not under keg corn. We weren't under pine tree. It came in horizontally. It didn't come from above. You know, it wasn't a bounce and roll. It was definitely a skid and hit. You know, and you had the whole side of the car get peppered. And again, we're on top of the mountain. We're like, there's nobody around, you know, because we'd already drove the area. We've been sitting there for a little bit, and it was raining. I mean, it was like, it didn't make anything. We heard some stuff going in. And now taken from the knocks and whoops, depending on where we are, I kind of take a half check, because I found this really great area. And then I was at another festival, and this guy's like, yeah, I'm down there screaming and doing whoops and knocks and everything else. And I'm like, not this particular location, but I've been to a couple others. Like, there's sightings in the area, and you're like, well, no, I know this guy's doing that. And that's a big thing now, is that you get these places that have been featured on some of the shows and stuff, and how much can you take for knocks and how much can you take for screams? You know, I mean, you can kind of feel the difference, but again, that's something. So I don't go out and bang on trees anymore, because there's that, and there's the pine cone issue, where, as you ask, you know, if you had one day that you just kind of like, whoa, I had taken a coworker and her daughter out, because her daughter was going to write a paper on the subject, kind of, you know, a pro con kind of thing. So I take them up to an area. Yeah, there's supposedly some sightings. It's close to this one here, and I know the area pretty decent, so I know there's a nice bench. So I walk them over. I set them down on the bench. One gets the night vision, one gets the thermal. I do what you do when you get on fishing. You know, you grab your cell phone and start playing around, because nothing happens. I'm not really paying attention to where I'm standing. I always remember where you're standing. I didn't realize I was standing on a piece of slate, and something bluff charged us there. Now, could have been a bear, could have been a deer, could have been something else. I don't know. But as I turn to get my flashlight on what it was, I trip and fall. They start to scream at the top of their lungs. Neither are really seasoned. One's pretty easy to scare, kind of look at her sometimes, and she, you know, is there. And, you know, mom looks at daughter and a couple of expletives about turning the flashlight on. I get back up, got my flashlight, and whatever it was gone. but it was just kind of weird. So the next day I go up there with my science buddy. We're walking through. He gets a phone call from his wife. And at about the same time, I hear something come whipping through the trees. And I'm like, wow, here's the thing. We had this, whatever go on. I've got something coming to the tree. So I'm like, I need to go see what it is. So I go charging off towards the sound. And I'm about 50 yards into the tree line. And I realize it's not coming through the trees. It's coming down from the trees. I'm in a high stand of pines, and there were pine cones coming down. Well, the pine cones were about 6.5 to 7 inches long, so they're about a half a pound because they're nice and green. And as they're coming down, they're hard. So as they're hitting the other tree limbs coming down, they sound like they're knocking coming through the trees. And when they hit the ground, they give you a pretty good thump. And I don't have it right here in front of me. I will share that audio and visual with you there, because it's kind of an interesting thing, because if you take the visual out, everybody's like, you got knocks. No, what I have is pine cones. Excuse me. And after doing some research and calling some botanists that we know, we found that, the pine cones drop at different times of the year. It doesn't have to be a temperature phase. It just, when their chemicals hit a certain thing, they just start dropping pods. And we kind of looked at that year round. So a lot of folks are like, oh, I heard a knock. Well, are you standing in the middle of a pine forest? Because it will really make a difference on how that sound comes down and the echo you'll get off coming those things. And like I said, I will look for that. It's all in a presentation I have on the laptop that I use as part of that audio.
I've never heard that viewpoint before, and that is incredible, Mike. Like, that's what I like about you, is your way of thinking about things. And I mean, you're one of the guys that you contact me quite a bit after certain episodes, and you're like, dude, I don't know about, like, and you're throwing stuff at me. I'm like, yeah, that's a solid point. Like, you're really looking into stuff.
But, I like I said, I have a friend that had an encounter in South America with what they believe was a mapinguari. Steve's interview, you can go listen to his, and I've interviewed Ray on my show as well and talked to his family. But I've also talked to a couple of the other gentlemen that were with him in South America during that particular operation. All swearing on their families' lives, their jobs, their careers. Some can't come because they're still working in particular fields that they can't come out. I know as they get closer to retirement, they've all offered to kind of come public with it, but they're like, we saw it. We were up close. If we would have shot at it, would have given away where we were. And, talking to those folks, talking to, Brian Gosling and some of those guys in the Whitehall, the law enforcement, the military, the doctors that I've talked to and say, they're there. I've had folks take me to their locations, and I've watched and seen the physical response that they've had. I had one witness take me to a spot. Nobody had been there. I think his wife had been there. It was the only other person that, not even into the location where he had his sighting. And watching a very large grown man break down in tears saying, this is what I saw. This is what I saw here. And, seeing the traumatic experience in his face, and can say, okay, what did you see and where were you and how can you describe it? And Joe and I actually just did a presentation together, and it just happened to coincide a couple weeks before. And I think you and I talked about, the paint sample idea. You talk to witnesses now all over the country, all over the world. And it's like, I saw something that's brown, or I saw something that's green. Well, I had a gentleman that was up in the Adirondack area, and he says, I saw something and it was this color. Well, okay, what's gray to you and what's gray to somebody else, what's brown to somebody else. So I'm like, go to your local box store and get some paint chips.
Oh, that's a good idea, man.
So you go to that local big box store and you pick up the paint chip. And I can say, this particular brand is this particular color, or it's this particular color. And again, here's the interesting thing. So you and I are looking at this on a computer monitor. With using a computer monitor, and yeah, there is another way of doing things with a computer monitor. But depending on what your settings are, if you've got warm settings, cold settings, whatever, it's going to look a little different. But having those hard physical copies in front of you, Very important. But, and this is why we network in this business or in this field. Find a buddy that's got some talents or some skills. We all have something to offer. So my buddy Matt Larson there in Central Florida Bigfoot, who's a photojournalist, and he's a camera guy. He's an artist. Well, his wife's also an artist. They said, get Pantones. So I don't think I even had these when we were in Ohio. These are industrial color standards.
Yep.
So somebody anywhere around the world. Now, this particular rock is not cheap. These are an old used set. But what I use for my presentations now, I want on Amazon for $24.
Oh, wow.
And I got it's a fabric. So that's awesome. Joe sat there and I said, what did you see and what color? He could go right down and pick the color.
Wow.
And that's now I can take it into a log, or we can have somebody, and I've mentioned it to Scott and putting it in his thing and say, hey, this is what it is. Or you can print them off, but again, depending on what your printer ink, but at least it will get you close. Now, here's the other thing is you have somebody that has color blindness or some kind of visual thing, still having this color. When they pick that color out, you have an idea of what color they saw. What color in their mind they saw might be different, but you can still document that kind of thing. It's having those little documentations that we can log. So now when I talk to witnesses, usually I take the small binder with me, or I'll take the Pantones with me. There is another way with your phone. You can use like Adobe Color Wheel to get you a general, because, as we design, simple things. I'm going to share this one with you right now. Let's see if it'll let me do it here. Come back up to the screen.
Yeah, shout out to Matt from Central Florida Bigfoot. He's a cool dude. So
yeah,
I'll definitely
I am getting him to Ohio.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I'm doing my best to get him there. So
nice. Okay.
I'm going to pull the screen up here so I can see. So if I make this bigger, of course it's not going to do it now, right? Close. Make this bigger. So simple little color chart, but as we go in and we look at things, it's going to be a little different, but we can go in and pick our shading. But when we do a custom color, it'll give you this hex number down at the bottom. And I don't know if you can see that or if I need to blow it up a little bit. But by picking that custom color, we can take that gives us an industrial standard. And, any of those.
And you can use that hex code everywhere to find that color. Yeah.
Yep. So if somebody takes and goes on their machine and says, hey, this, at least you're going to get in within 3 or 4 shades of what we're doing. I get both screens going here, so I'll put you back down. So,
oh man,
that's another project I'm working on that'll you guys will be seeing soon. But it's just like I said, it's just going and getting. Oh well, let's see. I'm going to paint the house this color. Oh, and this color happens to be all these shades of gray or brown. So tomorrow, Jeremiah, when you're out running around to this weekend, stop and get some paint samples.
Yep.
Particularly get a couple of shades of gray and a couple of shades of brown.
Okay.
Now I want you to do, go out in the front yard and walk up to your first pine tree and your first maple tree or your first birch tree. Wait until you get a couple of sightings in. So maybe you want to hold off on sending this one out for a couple of days. But look at the color shades you're going to get. And how, when somebody says gray, black, brown.
Yeah.
And that's what happened is, as I was talking to this gentleman and he says, it wasn't only gray, it was black and it was brown. And then when he sent me the color schemes and I said, please go to the location that you're at and tell me what trees are there. Take me some pictures of the trees. Well, those species of trees, if we compare those color schemes, blend almost into them. So if you were still. Oh, wow. And that's something else we'll be sharing through Matt coming up soon, because usually when I want something done video wise, I may talk about it. He's the guy I use to bring it to the world. Let's just say that.
This has been awesome. And the reason I love talking to you is I feel like, for one, more people need to know about Tactical Bigfoot Research, because you have the tricks up your sleeve like crazy. So I'm just glad you were able to share some of them in this episode, man.
Well,
So
you
good.
know, when I was getting ready to walk away, dude, you started Clubhouse and brought our group together. And that group, you know, it's a family, and we kind of share a lot of information. And that's a big thing. You know, there's another thing. What's so important about this topic? Think about the benefits. The friendships you make, we get into battles and stuff like that, and those folks that really are, you know, it's all about, you know, me, myself, and I. It's not that. I've met some wonderful people doing this. I've seen some amazing country and gone to some amazing pieces of property, and I've learned a lot of different tricks and trades for myself. But the benefits of getting out and going for a hike, your health benefits.
Oh yeah.
You know, the weight loss, the cardio, getting kids and families involved in projects together and not sitting on a couch anymore.
Absolutely.
I mean, it rekindled my interest in going back and looking at archaeology and anthropology. And when I started doing that, I did a deep dive and found one of my college professors actually spent time doing papers on primate dermoglyphics.
Wow.
That I was able to pass along to Alex when they were doing their stuff in Alaska. And it was like, okay, well, that professor passed him on to somebody else. And it was kind of, but again, where we go, you know, when you talk to a witness and you're like, what do they have to offer? You know, it's the garbage guy that's out at the road at 3 o'clock in the morning, or the newspaper delivery man. And they're like, well, what they saw? Well, guess what? Who's driving the road at that time in the morning? Who knows if Mrs. Jones's car is there, the trash cans are in the right spot? You know, it's a repetitive motion. Excuse me. Are you talking to an artist, and when they say it's this color of burnt orange, or it's this color of pink, you know, or this color of brown, and you can say they're picking up on those little things, or the hair kind of went this, or talking to a barber or something, it went certain ways, or an architect, you know. Do I always go on the tree stuff? Sometimes I don't, because of living in the Northeast and living through a couple ice storms up here and looking at snow load and falls and stuff. But there's another big thing. I go from here and then I go down to Florida. Well, if I'm out with the guys in Florida, I want them to explain what goes on in nature. The same thing if I came out to Iowa to hang out with you guys, what you're seeing with, you know, that stuff there, or folks in Oklahoma with, you know, they get all the crazy stuff out there.
Dude. Yeah.
And more sightings than anybody lately. I don't, you know.
In the Southeast, man. Southeast Oklahoma. Dude, but man, what a fun time chatting. I am so glad you're able to come on. Thank you so much, Mike, for stopping by. I'm sure people are going to be wanting to try to keep up to date with what you are up to. Is there a way they can do that?
So I'm most active on Instagram. We also do a podcast probably a couple times a month. Where's My Sage? So Tactical Bigfoot Research on Instagram and on Facebook and on YouTube. I also do a podcast, Where's My Sage, with my co-host Christy London. And it's usually Tuesday nights, a couple times a month. Right now, Christy's getting ready for a wedding for her daughter, so we're not getting out there. But we do everything from Bigfoot to the paranormal. She's a medium, so we'll do reading shows. But we've talked to folks from Jet Tila from the Food Network and about life's journeys. We've talked to survivalists from Naked and Afraid. You know, we've talked to military and law enforcement guys about, you know, some of their life's journeys and paths. Like I said, we all have something to offer. We can all learn from somebody. So that's where you can generally find us. I generally don't respond if somebody tries to send something to my personal Facebook. Send it to Tactical Bigfoot Research. That's the best way to kind of get in touch with me. So
awesome. Oh, so good. Thank you for hanging out, Mike.
No problem, brother. You know, I've always been here for you.